This is a beginner guide for Retribution Paladin in patch 11.0.5. This is going to be, of course, very beginner friendly. Hello, I'm Javier. If you don't know me, I do every single spec in the game every single season, and I make it accessible for beginners. So let's start off with what is specific to being a paladin. We are going to be going into the Templar hero talents for both the single target and multi-target, or the Mythic Plus rotations. I'm going to be talking you through those shortly. Let's look at our character sheet. We are going with strength as our primary stat. A higher and higher eye level is what you generally want to go for with your gear. Now, a lot of people may talk around stat priorities and weights. Generally, for beginners and intermediate players, I say don't worry too much. Always just focus on getting a higher eye level of gear. If you do want to look more closely into the secondary stats, I would recommend you simulate your character. And if you don't know what that means, then you probably are too much of a beginner to need to worry about it, which is, in my eyes, a good thing. If you do, however, we do offer that help with that through the Discord, and even more so if you're a Patreon. So looking at the stats, you've got critical strike, where you can do more damage. Haste increases attack speed and casting speed. It does a bit more than that, but we'll just leave it as that for now. The Mastery. Now that is really interesting as a Retribution Paladin. Ours is called High Lord's Judgment. It increases our holy damage, which a lot of our spells do, and Judgment, which is an ability we'll be using, has a chance to blast the target, dealing damage. The more Mastery we have, the more that holy damage, etc. is going to do. Versatility is the same for every spec in the game. It increases your damage and healing that you do, but reduces any damage taken. So, what else do Retribution Paladins have? Well, if I go into combat, you will see on my weak aura here that I've got this kind of orange bar filling up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That is holy power. Some abilities and our auto attacks here will generate holy power, and then some of them are going to spend it. And that basically is the main resource that we're going to be using as a Retribution Paladin. We do also have like mana, but we don't really use it. You don't really need to worry about that as a Ret Paladin. From left to right, we've got the top priority spells and the lowest priority spells. We're going to be going through this now, from obviously highest to lowest priority. And this is going to be for the single target rotation. We're then going to look at what we change for multi-target, which FYI isn't much at all. Then we're going to talk through the talents, etc., and build upon that rotation. If this video is helpful for you, please click that subscribe button, as that really helps support the channel. Leave a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts below. So, execution sentence is the first one. A hammer, which you can see up here, slowly falls from the sky onto the target. And after 12 seconds, they suffer 20% of the damage taken from your abilities as holy damage during that time. So basically, while the hammer is falling, any damage you do, right? Let's say between it falling to it hitting, you deal 100,000 damage. When it finally hits, they will suffer 20%. So let's say 20,000, because that's 20% of 100,000 of the damage you've done, as holy damage. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, as it's falling, when it finally hits them, they'll then be hit from the hammer by a percentage of the damage you've done in the meantime. So we're going to use that on cooldown, okay? Secondly is Wake of Ashes, but we're actually only going to use this when it is called Hammer of Light. And that is specifically from the Light's Guidance hero talent here. Wake of Ashes is replaced with Hammer of Light after it's cast. Hammer down your enemy with the power of the light, dealing damage, and damage to nearby enemies too. And additionally, you'll call down Empyrean hammers from the sky to strike nearby targets. So basically, we're only using Wake of Ashes here when it is Hammer of Light. We're using Wake of Ashes here, normally, in the rotation. And if you're thinking, okay, well, Wake of Ashes is here, but you're saying not to use it, well, this is because this is a priority list and not a rotation, meaning our number one priority is use execution sentence. If we can't do that, we go to here and use Hammer of Light, but we don't have Hammer of Light, so we move to here. And then once we get to here, we just use the basic Wake of Ashes. So when I use Wake of Ashes, suddenly our priority is to use Hammer of Light here. And as you can see, the icon changes for it. So hopefully that makes sense in how we're setting up this action bar. The next one on our priority list is Final Verdict. Unleashes a powerful weapon strike that deals damage to an enemy. Final Verdict has a chance to reset the cooldown of Hammer of Wrath and make it usable on any target regardless of their health. And that's this ability here, and I'm going to explain that more shortly. So, Final Verdict uses free holy power. As you can see here, I'm now capped out at 5 holy power. We only want to use Final Verdict when we have 5 holy power at this point in the rotation. Okay? So if you've got 5 holy power, use Final Verdict. Then we're going to use Blade of Justice. We're specifically going to use this to apply a debuff to our target, which is this one here, Expurgation. Suffering radiant damage every 2.9 seconds. Holy damage taken from Arna Paladin is increased by 5%. So basically, we want to make sure we're refreshing that buff, or debuff should I say, on the target at all times. Now, you'll also notice when I use Blade of Justice that there's this light on the floor. That is consecration. So when we use our Blade of Justice, we're also going to put a consecration on the floor, dealing even more damage to our target, taking holy damage every second, and movement speed is reduced. So that's to our target. So let's just recap where we're at. Use Execution Sentence on cooldown. Use your Hammer of Light when it activates here. Use Final Verdict if you have 5 holy power. Use Blade of Justice to keep up the debuff of Expurgation on your target. And then we're going to use Wake of Ashes on cooldown. Obviously that then procs Hammer of Light, which we use as a priority. At this point, we're then going to use this one here, Divine Toll. Instantly cast Judgment, which is this ability here, on up to 5 nearby targets. Divine Toll's Judgment deals double damage. So we use that pretty much on cooldown as well. Then, if the target is below 35% health, we're going to use this ability here, Hammer of Wrath. Hurls a divine hammer that strikes an enemy, only usable on enemies that have less than 20% health, or during Avenging Wrath, and this generates 1 holy power. Now, remember that with our Final Verdict, it does have a 15% chance. As you can see there, it's activated. It's got a 15% chance to reset the cooldown on Hammer of Wrath and let us use it whenever, on whatever health they have. So we can sometimes use it here after using Final Verdict. Then we're going to use Judgment if we have 3 or less holy power. Why? Because Judgment generates 2 holy power. So meaning, if I've got 4 or 5 holy power and I generate 2, obviously it's going to be going over the cap and therefore is wasted. So only use Judgment if you have 3 or less holy power. If we have more than that, again we move down, or if we've got 5 holy power, of course we're using it on Final Verdict. After that, we are using Blade of Justice. So we're only using it up here to add that Expurgation debuff. We're using it down here, basically any remaining stacks that we can, or any remaining charges that we can use. Then we can use Hammer of Wrath, again if we've got 3 or less holy power, or 4 or less if the target is above 20% health. Finally, Final Verdict again if we only have 3 to 4 holy power. Let's run through the entire rotation again just to make sure we fully understand it. Use Expurgation Sentence on cooldown. Use Hammer of Light when it's available. Use Final Verdict if you've got 5 holy power. Make sure you're using Blade of Justice to reapply the debuff. Use Wake of Ashes. Okay, then it's back to Hammer of Light. We're at now 5 holy power, so we're using Final Verdict. We're going to use Divine Toll on cooldown. We're at 5 holy power, so we're using Final Verdict. The debuff is coming off, so we're using Blade of Justice again. We're at 5 holy power, so we're using Final Verdict. We're going to use Hammer of Wrath. We've got a free one here. Again, the debuff is coming off. Obviously, you'd go through it faster than this, by the way, but I'm just walking you through the steps in the way that we would do it. So, Execution Sentence, 5 holy power, Final Verdict, Hammer of Light. Get the debuff up with Blade of Justice. We're using Wake of Ashes. Okay, Hammer of Light. We use our free Hammer of Wrath. We can use our Judgment. Any remaining... Oh, hang on. No, Final Verdict. Keep the debuff up. And then again, we are using Final Verdict. We're going to use our Judgment and our Hammer of Wrath. Any remaining Blades of Justice that we can use, we're going to use. And then you can see that your Execution Sentence is coming off cooldown again. And that basically is the rotation. You're sort of going down, but going back up again as something as a higher priority comes up. So always trying to go back up to the highest priority and slowly working our way down as all of our high priority items are not available, etc. And that is the single target rotation. If we move on to the Mythic Plus rotation, you're going to see that not much is changing. If we go into the build, a few talents are changing here. We're going to go through the talents shortly. What we can see here is that we still have our execution sentence, etc. The main change is that we're not using our final verdict here, this one. We're not using that anymore. We're using Divine Storm instead. That also costs 3 holy power. Unleash a whirl of divine energy, dealing damage to all nearby enemies. TLDR, it's just the AoE version, basically. The rest of the rotation here is pretty much the same. Using Hammer of Light, using Wake of Ashes, using Divine Toll, Blade of Justice, Judgment, Hammer of Wrath, and then again Divine Storm. If you're only at 3 to 4 holy power, using it here at 5 holy power. That's literally the only difference we're doing in the rotation. Let's now look through the important talents that are underpinning the builds we've got here. This is where Expurgation comes from. Your Blade of Justice causes the target to burn over 9 seconds. This is a good one, Guided Prayer. When your health is brought below 25%, you instantly cast a free Word of Glory on yourself. Word of Glory is actually a holy, healing spell. So the TLDR here is when you go below 25% health, you are immediately healed, and it can only happen once every 60 seconds. Your auto attacks have a chance to reset the cooldown on Blade of Justice. So sometimes you'll see that the cooldown is completely reversed, and that is because of this. And Blade of Justice now hits nearby enemies for more damage, deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. Crusader Strike and Judgment. So Judgment's our hammer one down here, as you can see. Judgment hits an additional 4 targets, but deal 25% reduced damage to secondary targets. So you're starting to see actually some of our, what you might think of as single target ability, actually, especially in the AoE build, we're actually doing a lot of damage to different targets here, which is really useful, of course. We have these two on here, Burning Crusade, Divine Storm, Hammer, and Consecration deal radiant damage, and your abilities that deal radiant damage deal more damage. And Searing Light, where High Lord's Judgment and radiant damage abilities have a chance to call down an explosion of highly fire that deal damage and leave a consecration in its wake. If you've forgotten what High Lord's Judgment is on here, by the way, that's your Mastery that we spoke about. Mastery, again, High Lord's Judgment is 50% more effective on Judgment and Hammer of Wrath. Judgment applies an additional stack of Greater Judgment if known. And then this is an interesting one with your Divine Storm. So that's the AoE ability we're using to spend our holy power. Divine Storm projects an additional wave of light, striking all enemies in front of you for 20% of Divine Storm's damage. It's happening passively. I just think it's useful for you to know. So there's quite a lot going on there. All of those things I'm mentioning are actually passive things happening. So you don't have to think, oh my lord, there's so much going on I need to think about. You know, if you just follow the rotation I've shown you, then you're going to be fine. And what I would recommend is once you're a lot more familiar with your rotation, that is when you would then go, do you know what, I'm really comfortable with the rotation. I'm going to come back and just look through the talents and see how it all kind of slots together like a jigsaw puzzle. Speaking of that then, let's just talk quickly around more of the hero talents, because some of these are really interesting. So Hammer of Light, remember, is the main ability that we're getting off of our Wake of Ashes that is coming into the Templar hero talents. So Hammer of Light instantly calls down 2 Empyrean Hammers on your target when it's cast. Lovely. After casting Hammer of Light, you call down an Empyrean Hammer on a nearby target every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. When Empyrean Hammer critically strikes, its damage is dealt to nearby enemies as well, and they will then also deal reduced damage to you for a few seconds. Hammer of Light also applies Judgment to its targets and increases your haste for 8 seconds. Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm also call down Empyrean Hammers on nearby enemies. And we have here that casting Judgment increases the damage of Empyrean Hammers. Lastly, we've got Light's Deliverance. You gain a stack of Light's Deliverance when you call down an Empyrean Hammer, which, as you've seen, will be happening quite often. While Wake of Ashes and Hammer of Light are unavailable, you consume 50 stacks of Light's Deliverance, empowering yourself to cast Hammer of Light an additional time for free. So it's basically we're passively calling down hammers, bonking all of our targets on the head with them, doing a load of damage when we're doing so, and empowering our Wake of Ashes into Hammer of Light. And after reading out those hero talents, you'll sort of begin to understand why it's so important that we cast oh my goodness, Hammer of Light as a priority. One thing to mention, however, is don't forget, so Wake of Ashes generates free holy power, whereas your Hammer of Light will actually spend holy power. So if you can see here, Wake of Ashes generates free holy power, whereas Hammer of Light costs 5 holy power. And that is just something to be mindful of. Because Wake of Ashes generates free anyway, you're only going to have to generate another 2 to be able to use Hammer of Light. It's never normally really an issue. And they are the rotations. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is going to be just some utilities that you may or may not be aware of as a paladin. So I don't want to overwhelm you. So what I would, I said to go through your sort of talents, etc. Once you're more comfortable, do the same thing in your spellbook because it's a really useful thing to do. We've got something called blessings as a paladin. Honestly, utilities, paladins, so OP. Blessing of Freedom. You can grant immunity to movement impairing effects to an ally. Now, Blessing of Protection, this is a bit of a blessing. Oh my god, quite literally. I literally, people are like, no pun intended, but literally I didn't mean that. This literally is a blessing and a curse. Blesses a party or raid member, granting them literal immunity to physical damage and harmful effects for 10 seconds, right? However, you might think, wow, that is just bloody fantastic. Well, actually it is. Do not, however, use this on a tank. The caveat to using Blessing of Protection is that you lose all threat because you are literally immune to attacks. So an enemy cannot attack you. So if you cast it on a tank, the mobs will then start attacking other people. And tanks actually get really annoyed when you do this. And often it's a really innocent mistakes that paladins do who are beginners and don't understand that. So I just want to let you know not to use it on a tank. Blessing of Sacrifice reduces damage taken, but you suffer all of that damage. You can't die by it though. It will actually last until you fall below 20% health. So it's a bit risky, but Blinding Light can disorient targets. You have your auras, Devotion, reducing damage taken by the party, Crusader, increasing mounted speed, or Consecration, interrupt and silence effects on you guys are shorter. Divine Shield. So I would normally have Devotion up at all times, unless there's other paladins. Divine Shield on a 3.5 minute cooldown gives you specifically immunity to all damage, harmful effects, knockbacks, and forced movement. Can you see it says it cannot be used if you have forbearance, and it causes forbearance? Things like Blessing of Protection, or BOP as people call it, these all give forbearance. So I can't use Blessing of Protection and then immediately use Divine Shield on myself, for example. Divine Steed gives you 100% movement speed upon horseback for a few seconds in combat or indoors. Hammer of Justice can stun your target on a 30-second cooldown. Lay on Hands is an amazing spell. Heals a friendly target equal to 100% of your maximum health. Not 100% of their maximum health, 100% of your maximum health. So if they have 200k health and you have 100k, then they will be healed for 100k. This is also a really important one, and this is like the most important thing I've said in this video. Rebuke. This is your interrupt, okay? This is how you interrupt the enemy's spellcasting, and it is super duper whooper important. You will be loved by your Mythic Plus comrades if you use this, just non-stop interrupting. If you don't use it at all and you don't interrupt your enemy spellcasting, it can end up in wipes and everyone dying. I would say the biggest mistake beginners make, and even veteran players, is not interrupting enough. Interrupting an enemy spellcast on as much as possible is so important. And lastly, we have things like Shield of the Righteous, which you may not be using. Word of Glory, which you use holy power to heal somebody for. Generally not going to be using that. Cleanse Toxins can remove poison and disease effects. That can really help out your healers. Divine Protection, reducing damage you take on a 1 minute cooldown. Have I missed anything? Oh yes, a Shield of Vengeance. Creates a barrier of holy light that absorbs damage for 10 seconds. When it expires, it bursts to inflict holy damage equal to the amount absorbed, divided among all nearby enemies. So there's a lot of utilities that we have got here. I don't want to overwhelm you. I feel like I may have just overwhelmed you, so apologies if so. But again, you know, if you are stuck on any of this, feel free to join my Discord, comment down below. If you would like as well, you can join my Patreon, where you can actually get a lot of other benefits. You can get this entire UI here that's all custom made by me. I do use this little Paladin weak aura in the middle. This specifically is not made by me, but everything else you see on screen is all bespoke details profiles, voodoo profiles, LVUI, etc., etc. I can help you install it if you wish. We have a VIP channel in Discord for Patreons and YouTube members where you can ask for one-on-one help. We can help review your logs and help you improve and things like that. If you are looking for other spec guides, check out the playlist you now see on screen, as I do all of them. And again, please don't forget to subscribe.